Hi everyone. Okay, so in this video we are going to look at sort of the getting started process here with Maya. And what I mean by that is that we are going to be working a lot, presumably from your thumb drive, right? So in other words, you're going to be bringing a thumb drive with you to class every week. And that means that maybe you'll be working on files at home, and so on. And you'll be bringing them in, and somehow you've got to get the files from your home computer to this computer, or maybe you've got to transfer the files from one of the computers in the lab to a different computer in the lab. Now, there's a process here. Now, I'm sure for those of you that have worked on, either something as simple as a Microsoft Word document to a Photoshop document, you're used to moving files back and forth from one computer to another. That's not out of the ordinary. You might have emailed them and so on. But with Maya, it's a little bit more complicated. And so actually, before we get too deep into learning about Maya itself, I want to talk a little bit about how Maya's file system works. Now, I know that sounds incredibly boring and not worth spending time on, but please watch this video in its entirety, because it is going to save you hours and hours of time if you do this right. And if you sort of gloss this over, it's going to cost you big time later. So this little 5-minute lesson here and kind of memorizing what we're about to talk about is essential. All right, so let's talk about this. So I've got a thumb drive here. It's just called 3D van der Heyden. And that would be, a fine name for any thumb drive that you're going to be using. You might be using this thumb drive for other classes. But the first thing you want to realize is that you want to have an actual physical thumb drive. I know a lot of you guys use the cloud, and that's fine, but you want to have redundancy, right? So you want to have your files usually in 2 places, not just one. There have been a lot of students in previous semesters that have only backed up their files in one place, and it's a recipe for disaster. And so you just want to make sure that maybe you send yourself a copy of these files on the cloud, but you always want to also have them on this thumb drive. I recommend just using your thumb drive as the primary thing. It's just faster and more immediate and so on. Okay, so let's talk about how to get things on and off the thumb drive here. So the first thing let's look at is Maya itself. So Maya, we're going to talk a little bit more about the interface in the coming video here. But the one thing that you got to know is that when you create a file, a Maya scene file, as it is called, it's sort of like, if you have a Photoshop file or if you have a Microsoft Word file, it contains the information in the document, right? But there's more to it than that. In Maya, there's a lot of other stuff that goes along with your file. In other words, when you save a file, you're not just going to be saving one thing. You're going to be saving a bunch of stuff. And so the best thing to do when you save is to use Maya's file system. So I'm going to show you what this looks like. So to show you what it looks like, I'm going to actually create one here. So to create a file, and you should do this with me as you're watching this, go to File, and then scroll down to Project Window here, right? And basically what Project Window is, it's going to create this little file system for you to organize all of the stuff that Maya needs to save. So go to Project Window here, and it will bring up this window. Now, this looks rather intimidating, but basically what it's giving you here, what it's going to create, is it's going to create a bunch of separate folders. And each of these folders have different types of data that Maya is going to save. So in other words, when you save a document, you're not just saving one thing, you're often saving multiple things together. And this is sort of so this group of folders here is going to be inside of a larger folder called your Maya projects folder. And so we want to create one of those. So I'm going to press new here, and I am going to create a project, and I'll call this van der Heyden Project 1. And for each project, I recommend that you create a new projects folder. You don't have to, but it sort of simplifies things a little bit. So when we do a project in this class, we're going to have about 4 of them this semester. And you'll want to create one of these maybe for each of the projects. So we've got that going. Now we have to tell Maya where to put this whole file system here. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to save it to the desktop. Now I'm doing this on a Windows machine, but chances are you're going to be doing this if you're doing it in the labs. It's probably going to be on a Mac. If you are doing it at home, it might be on a Windows PC or a Mac, but the principle is the same. We're going to click on this folder here, And I am going to tell Maya to save this project folder just to the desktop right now. We're not going to keep it there, but we're gonna save it to that temporarily. So I'm just going to click on desktop here. Then I'm going to hit select down in the right hand corner. And then once we've got our name for our project folder and our location for it, I'm just going to hit accept. And as soon as I do that, if I go to my desktop, now you can't see this right now because I've got two screens, but it created this little folder here. And if I open this folder up, you can see it has a bunch of subfolders inside of it. It's got one called assets, autosave, cache, and so on. So this is your projects folder, and you're going to get to know this pretty well over the course of the semester. So now the trick is, when you save stuff in Maya, you're going to be saving them inside of this folder. So you always want to make sure that basically at the beginning of every class, you're gonna take this off of your thumb drive. So when you show up, I'm just going to drag this onto my thumb drive right now. Right, so, and then I'll actually save, let's open up Maya here, and I'll save this scene. I'll just create a few objects in my scene here, just so that we know that we've got an actual file here. And so I'm going to go to save as, and I'll save this as project 1. And then go to my desktop here, and I'll save this to my scenes folder. Now, this is very important. But you'll notice I had to go looking for this, and we're going to talk about that in just a second here. So now, if I go to this folder on the desktop, you can see that inside of this folder, if I go into my scenes folder, there's project 1. It's hanging out in there, right? And what I'm going to do is, if I open up my thumb drive here, there's my project that I just dragged in here. Let's say it's the end of class, and you've got this project folder that you created. It's sitting on the desktop right now. You've got a scene that's saved inside of this project folder. You're just going to drag that project folder onto your thumb drive and replace the old one, right? And then when you get to class, you're going to take that project out of your thumb drive, drag it onto the desktop, and replace the one on the desktop, right? And then from Maya, you'll open that up. Now, there's one extra step to this. So right now we've created a project folder. We know where to put our scene files and things like that. But the other thing that's crucial is that this file folder here, the projects folder, this is what, I kind of think of it, this is sort of a dumb folder. All this is just a folder with some folders inside of it. In order for Maya to actually use this project folder, we have to kind of tell Maya where to find it. So in other words, Maya doesn't know right now that we've got a project folder set up for it. And so what we need to do is we need to go to File and Set Project. So once we've created our project folder, we need to set the project folder. And so that's where our desktop folder comes in. So basically we came to class, we had a project sitting, our projects folder sitting on our thumb drive. We dragged that folder out of our thumb drive, put it onto the desktop, and then our next step is we needed to tell Maya, hey, look inside of this project folder. So what we do is we go to, again, set, let me just do that again. We go to Set Project, right? And this brings up the Set Project window. And this is just telling Maya, look into this folder. So I'm going to double click on Van der Heijden Project 1. That's on my desktop right now. And I just get to the top level of this folder here. I don't click on any of the other folders, and then I hit Set. Now, if I go to save my file, you'll see that it takes me right to the scenes folder, which is exactly where we want to save that file. So this is a little bit cumbersome at first, I know, but this is a crucial step in the process. And by the end of the semester, you'll get very familiar with the inner workings of the project folder and stuff like that. But it's very important that we get into the habit of doing this every time. It's very easy to overlook this at the beginning, and I without a doubt some of you guys are going to struggle with this a little bit, but I will sort of make sure that you know this process by at least the first or second project, the end of the first or second project.